asylum, or reminded that A's neglect of sanitation may kill the child of B 2 miles off, or start an epidemic in which the most conscientious sanitarians may perish. We must face the fact that society is founded on intolerance. There are glaring cases of the abuse of intolerance, but they are quite as characteristic of our own age as of the Middle Ages. The typical modern example and contrast is compulsory inoculation, replacing what was virtually compulsory baptism. But compulsion to inoculate is objected to as a crudely unscientific and mischievous anti-sanitary quackery, not in the least because we think it wrong to compel people to protect their children from disease. Its opponents would make it a crime and will probably succeed in doing so, and that will be just as intolerant as making it compulsory. Neither the Pasteurians nor their opponents, the sanitarians, would leave parents free to bring up their children naked, though that course also has some plausible advocates. We may prate of toleration as we will, but society must always draw a line somewhere between allowable conduct and insanity or crime, in spite of the risk of mistaking sages for lunatics and saviors for blasphemers. We must persecute, even to the death, and all we can do to mitigate the danger of persecution is, first, to be very careful what we persecute, and second, to bear in mind that unless there is a large liberty to shock conventional people and a well-informed sense of the value of originality, individuality, and eccentricity, the result will be apparent stagnation covering a repression of evolutionary forces which will eventually explode with extravagant and probably destructive violence. Variability of toleration. The degree of tolerance attainable at any moment depends on the strain under which society is maintaining its cohesion. In war, for instance, we suppress the Gospels and put Quakers in prison, muzzle the newspapers, and make it a serious offense to show a light at night. Under the strain of invasion, the French government in 1792 struck off 4,000 heads, mostly on grounds that would not, in time of settled peace, have provoked any government to chloroform a dog. And in 1920, the British government slaughtered and burnt in Ireland to persecute the advocates of a constitutional change which it had presently to effect itself. Later on, the fascisti in Italy did everything that the Black and Tans did in Ireland, with some grotesquely ferocious variations, under the strain of an unskilled attempt at industrial revolution by socialists who understood socialism even less than capitalists understand capitalism. In the United States, an incredibly savage persecution of Russians took place during the scare spread by the Russian Bolshevik Revolution after 1917. These instances could easily be multiplied, but they are enough to show that between a maximum of indulgent toleration and a ruthlessly intolerant terrorism, there is a scale through which toleration is continually rising or falling, and that there was not the smallest ground for the self-complacent conviction of the 19th century that it was more tolerant than the 15th, or that such an event as the execution of Joan could not possibly occur in what we call our own more enlightened times. Thousands of women, each of them 1,000 times less dangerous and terrifying to our governments than Joan was to the government of her day, have within the last 10 years been slaughtered, starved to death, burnt out of house and home, and what not that persecution and terror could do to them, in the course of crusades far more tyrannically pretentious than the medieval crusades, which proposed nothing more hyperbolical than the rescue of the Holy Sepulchre from the Saracens. The Inquisition, with its English equivalent, the Star Chamber, are gone, in the sense that their names are now disused. But can any of the modern substitutes for the Inquisition, the special tribunals and commissions, the punitive expeditions, the suspensions of the Habeas Corpus Act, the proclamations of martial law and of minor states of siege, and the rest of them, claim that their victims have as fair a trial, as well considered a body of law to govern their cases, or as conscientious a judge to insist on strict legality of procedure, as Joan had from the Inquisition and from the spirit of the Middle Ages, even when her country was under the heaviest strain of civil and foreign war. From us she would have had no trial and no law, except a Defence of the Realm Act suspending all law, and for judge she would have had at best a bothered major, and at worst a promoted advocate in ermine and scarlet, to whom the scruples of a trained ecclesiastic like Cauchon would seem ridiculous and ungentlemanly. End of Part 3.